The assessment of the intelligence community just 3 months ago, which has been repeatedly affirmed by the intelligence community that Iran is not, in fact, pursuing nuclear weapons.
So recently, Glenn Greenwald talked a little bit about the pretext behind Israel's strike against Iran, the war propaganda that pertains to it, and why it's totally bogus, even according to the CIA and U.S. intelligence services. So let's watch, let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And again, there's been lots of civilians already killed in Iran, and they're obviously planning on building huge more. Now, speaking of the kind of war propaganda to which we're being subjected, here was Netanyahu today. Every time Israel goes to war against whatever country, every time the U.S. tells its citizens we have to pay for it, we have to arm it, we have to fight with Israel, you'll never guess what country we're told to think of as being equal to the new country that Israel wants to attack.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
And notice that he's said this for literally about 30 years. I think we're on record having him suggest that Iran is close to acquiring a nuke within months in 1992. And there's many more examples after that where he repeatedly says this. They haven't developed it, and now he's still saying they might be a year away. Well, even the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, disputes that and says they don't have it. She said that openly, and this is the propaganda.
This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were the victims of a Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime. Today, the Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear Holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime.
The new Nazis. We were told Hamas is the new Nazis, worse than ISIS. We were told that about Saddam Hussein, who was repeatedly equated with Adolf Hitler. That's a crucial part of the underpinning of war propaganda for both the United States and Israel, to invoke this World War II example that now happened 75 years ago.
It's all part of the war propaganda mythology, is to liken the CIA's latest boogeyman, Mossad's latest boogeyman, Israel's latest boogeyman, to Hitler without fail. It always happens. They said Putin was that. They said Saddam was that. They said Gaddafi was that. They said Assad was that. It goes on and on. Noriega, it always happens.
And that has been used and hauled out to justify every war. Now, we've shown you before all the footage. Everyone has seen now the montage of Netanyahu over 30 years, of Israel over 40 years, going back to the 1980s. Ever since the Iranian people overthrew the Shah of Iran, the puppet installed by the CIA to serve Israel and the United States and use Iranian resources in servitude to be able to stay in power, repress the Iranian people. Ever since that revolution occurred in 1979 that drove out the Shah and swept in a government, an Islamic government, vowing to protect Iranian sovereignty at all costs, Iranian nationalism, Iranian sovereignty. Ever since then, we've been told for 4 decades that they're about to get nuclear weapons. They're on the verge of getting nuclear weapons. They're weeks away. They're months away, maybe a year, milliseconds. And it never came true.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if one of them said they're -7 years away from acquiring it. It's just beating a dead horse that we all know is untrue until it's time to spout the propaganda again, which, you know, Israel First supporters are doing. Fans of this war are doing. All the neocons are out there repeating the same line, despite the fact that the U.S. intelligence services, the body most likely to want to drum up wars has actually denied it.
And yet the amount of people who are now willing to just start nodding the minute Netanyahu says, oh, they were about to get nuclear weapons this time, it's so alarming how easy it is to just convince people to nod and cheer as some other country just gets blown to bits, as our U.S. resources are diverted to the military-industrial complex, to weapons manufacturers, starving again the people at home in the United States, the American working class, the American middle class, all of whom were promised and constantly are promised that this time it'll be different, that we're going to stay out of foreign wars. You just give somebody a pretext, and they're so eager to believe that their country is fighting for the right reasons. I think a lot of it, too, is that when people feel impotent in their lives, they start getting vicarious strength. They like watching bombs going off and people being killed and feeling, yeah, we're the more powerful ones. We're crushing them. We're destroying them.
Yeah, it'll always be quick. It'll always be easy. They said that in the lead up to Afghanistan and Iraq. Both were 20-year blunders that amounted to nothing, cost billions of dollars, spent, hundreds of thousands of lives, about 1 million Iraqis killed in it, and it never pays off. And they still repeat the propaganda the time that it's time to go to war again. They still do it.
Which is why the world stood by. Most of it did, certainly in the West, as all of Gaza has basically been destroyed and huge numbers of people killed. But what makes the Netanyahu claim that Iran was about to get a nuclear weapon this time so extraordinary, when we watch members of the political class in both parties repeating it, Donald Trump repeating it, is that less than 3 months ago, Donald Trump's hand-picked director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, whose job it is to assess the intelligence and speak with one voice on behalf of the intelligence community about their best assessment, about what the intelligence shows, went to the U.S. Senate and was asked about whether there's intelligence showing that, as Israel claims, Iran is actively pursuing nuclear weapons. Just listen to what she said. How is this being so easily disregarded? This is not some deep state functionary. This is not a career service person. This is not a holdover. This is Donald Trump's choice, who he fought very hard to install as DNI. Because he trusted her to give him the real intelligence. And this is what she said under penalty of perjury, under lying to the Senate is a crime, when asked whether Iran is actively pursuing nuclear weapons.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
So that was the assessment of the intelligence community just 3 months ago, which has been repeatedly affirmed by the intelligence community, that Iran is not, in fact, pursuing nuclear weapons. And I think what has happened in American discourse and in Trump's brain as well is that the distinction between a nuclear energy program, which the entire world has always agreed Iran has the right to have, and a nuclear weapons program, I think that distinction has been deliberately obscured. You may remember at the start of the negotiation process between the U.S. and Iran, which President Trump was very enthusiastic about, Steve Witkoff said, of course, the deal has to allow the Iranians to enrich at a low enough level to have nuclear energy. What we can't have them do is enrich at 60% or 90%, where they can get close to a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, exactly right. And he's so on point on this that so clumsily is this just disregarded. And actually, it's not clumsy. It's deliberate. If you're Donald Trump, you know that this is what the intelligence shows. This is what Tulsi Gabbard said in a public testimony to the Senate. This is his hand-picked DNI. He fought hard for her, as Glenn said. And this is just being buried. This is the lead right now. It completely disrupts the entire war propaganda campaign, the pretext for getting involved in this from Israel's perspective and the U.S. perspective. Trump spouting out how great this is, and it's a little bit unclear to the extent that he is involved in the planning of this operation, or if the U.S. is going to join in terms of actually doing some of the bombing soon. We know they've sent interceptors there. We know they finance Israel. We know they finance and give them technology and intelligence. But for this to just be completely dropped and ignored by the corporate media is so telling. It's very telling of the influence that the Israel lobby has, and that the Zionist lobby has, and that the military-industrial complex has, to draw us into this war, keep it going, and just keep the facade up. Just pretend like it's 2003, that Iraq is going to acquire weapons of mass destruction. Just replace weapons of mass destruction with nuclear weapons. That's all you have to do.
That is what the Iran deal did. It put all huge inspectors and surveillance inside of Iran, inside of these facilities underground, and we were able to monitor that Iran was not enriching uranium anywhere over the limit to which they agreed to keep it for nuclear energy purposes. And when President Trump withdrew from that deal, despite, you can read every congressional report saying that Iran had been abiding by that deal, the U.S. government, Western governments, and NATO, monitoring services, once President Trump withdrew from that deal, the inspectors were no longer permitted to be in there, but we still have all kinds of intelligence, including all kinds of spies and everything else, as we've seen over the last 5 days, tons of spies working for the U.S. and Israel. That's how the intelligence community knew, and eavesdropping and surveillance.
Yeah, and frankly, I think Obama was a disaster of a president in regard to foreign policy and other areas for that matter. But this was the one thing that was done well. It actually did seem to normalize relations to some extent with Iran. Trump tore up the treaty early on in his presidency, said it was, too lax toward the Iranians, but it did seem like they were complying, and it certainly removed the pretext for a war. It's why some people were never trustworthy of Trump on foreign policy in regard to Israel, because he seems to be owned by them. Because tearing up that agreement was tearing up the pretext that eliminated the possibility of war. Now it existed again after that fact. They can drum this up despite what Gabbard and the CIA is saying about them having nuclear weapons. They clearly don't. They're not close to obtaining them. There's no evidence they even restarted the program since 2003, according to her exact words in that testimony. But that is the drumbeat of war. It continues regardless. The wheels of the war machine are greased with this nonsense every single time in the lead up to all these catastrophic regime change operations. This time's no different.
That the Ayatollah had not authorized or directed Iran to seek a nuclear weapon, despite what Prime Minister Netanyahu was claiming to justify this war. Now, I want you to listen to this. This is in 2002, September of 2002. So just a little bit under 6 months before the U.S. went and invaded Iraq, which overwhelmingly people in the United States agree was a huge disaster, a massive mistake, or really destroyed faith and trust in what our U.S. government tells us, because it turned out that everything they said about why that war was necessary turned out to be a lie. We were told it would be quick and easy. It lasted many, many years. Thousands of Americans died in that war for reasons no one understands. And I'm not really sure why, but when the U.S. Congress was debating whether to authorize the United States to go invade Iraq, one of the people they wanted to come and testify before the Congress to tell them what to think and how to understand things, they invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I know why. Because he supported the invasion. He was in the bag against Saddam's regime from the start. Just like he wants Iran's regime erased now, he was dead set on believing that this would send positive reverberations throughout the region. Maybe he'll say it. I've seen this video so many times, but maybe he's going to play it right now.
And he went to the U.S. Congress, gave a ton of interviews publicly as well, urging and encouraging the United States to go and invade Iraq, promising that it would bring all kinds of peace and harmony and democracy throughout the Middle East, would transform it. The United States had a unique chance to get rid of Saddam Hussein and transform the Middle East forever for the good. But he also insisted that Iran had a WMD program and was pursuing nuclear weapons. Exactly what he's trying to convince Americans now about Iran. Listen to what he said. Just listen to how identical this is. This is Netanyahu 23 years ago convincing the United States to go fight a different war in the Middle East against one of Israel's most steadfast enemies.
And this is a tyrant who is feverishly trying to acquire nuclear weapons. And today the United States must destroy the same regime, because a nuclear-armed Saddam will place the security of our entire world at risk. It is simply not.
I just want you to listen to the kind of dictatorial language he uses there. Because, as we said, Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, until Netanyahu fired him just 6 months ago or so, went on CNN earlier today and said the United States is obligated, Trump is obligated to go fight this war against Iran with us. Like giving out orders, like obligated by what? By Israel's dictates? Listen to Netanyahu using that same language.
Will place the security of our entire world at risk is simply not reflecting the reality to assume that Saddam isn't feverishly working to develop nuclear weapons. As we speak. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
I guarantee you, he said, I guarantee you. There's no way to deny, he said, that Saddam Hussein is rushing feverishly to get those nuclear weapons. We have to stop that. But also, he said, I guarantee you to Americans and to the U.S. Congress that if you go in and take out Saddam Hussein, you're going to spread peace and stability and democracy.
And here's the actual reverberations that move sent. It created a power vacuum in which ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq took advantage of the situation, killed a lot of people, killed a lot of servicemen, and it caused the Saudis to get upset at the U.S. And then in return for the Saudis getting upset at the U.S. agreed to placate them by getting involved in their civil war against the Houthis, or Ansar Allah, in Yemen. And the U.S. is still involved in that conflict. It's over a decade long. It's a mass starvation campaign where many estimates are that 500,000 or so people have died. Cholera and malaria sweeps through the innocent there that caught up in this whole thing. And that's the reverberations this sent throughout the region. I don't have to tell you how this also affected Syria. ISIS was then influential in Syria, opposing Assad's regime, and Assad wasn't exactly a great guy, but Assad actually protected religious minorities, and now Syria is run by a very totalitarian regime. So those are the reverberations that this sent throughout the Middle East.
To this region.
Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. Principles of real estate, the 3 L's, location, location, location. The 3 principles of winning the war on terror are the 3 W's: winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier. The second victory in Iraq will make the third victory that much easier, less than dismantling.
By the way, you know what the third victory was supposed to be? So we were going to have the first victory in Afghanistan. That, of course, we never got. It took 20 years. We left after 20 years. Blew up a bunch of civilians on the way out. They then killed a bunch of our service members on the way out. And within seconds or days, the Taliban marched right back into power as if nothing had happened. After we were told for years that the U.S. military spent billions and billions and billions of dollars building up the Afghan security forces, that one day we're going to rule Afghanistan in our favor once we left. We left after 20 years.
Yeah, it took 20 years, hundreds of thousands of lives, several U.S. presidents, and billions of dollars to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. That's what happened there. And there's nothing to show for it.
And a deal negotiated by President Trump, implemented by President Biden. And the Taliban marched right into power. So there was no first victory there. There was no second victory in Iraq that Netanyahu promised. Even Tony Blair, who, when he realized there were no weapons of mass destruction, despite having been one of the most vocal and ardent supporters of joining George Bush, having the UK join George Bush in that war, and did so. When he realized there were no WMDs, as he kept insisting there were, he said he resorted to, well, at the very least, the worst that will be said is that we removed a vicious dictatorship and freed the Iraqi people from this vicious dictator. So it still will be a noble war. And by 2012, Tony Blair was admitting that what gave rise to ISIS and all of its splinter groups that we were told was so much worse than Al-Qaeda, which we had spent a decade fighting, was the power vacuum that we left in Iraq by taking out the government, balkanizing the country, letting huge amounts of civil war take place, war against the United States, insurgency battles against the countries that went to war. So there was no second victory in Iraq as well. And if anything, the Iraq war redounded most to the benefit of Iran. Saddam Hussein and Iran hated each other. They went to war against each other. And by removing the Ba'athist Party, it empowered Shiite militias who have more power in Iraq now than ever before, and therefore emboldened and empowered Iran in the region. That was the result of the Iraq war that Benjamin Netanyahu promised would transform the region. And of course, the nuclear weapons that he swore Saddam Hussein was pursuing and the chemical and biological weapons he assured us they had were all non-existent. But you see, he said, we're going to do that first victory in Afghanistan, the second victory in Iraq, and then we can do the third victory all the more easily. So what was that? What was that third victory? War in Afghanistan, war in Iraq, what was it? You can go back starting around 2004, 2005, neocons started going on a propaganda campaign saying the next step after Baghdad is Tehran.
Yeah.
That was their intention. They wanted to have regime change in Afghanistan, regime change in Iraq, and then go to Tehran. That was the big prize.
Yeah, and Bush named Iran as one of the three countries in what he called the axis of evil in a famous speech. It's also known that Iran was the last country on a list of what was called the clean break memo that Wesley Clark had seen when he waltzed into the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11. They showed him plans outlining 7 different regime change operations that were going to be planned within 5 years, and Iran was the last of them. Well, all the others have come to fruition except for this one, Iran. It's always been on the mind of Netanyahu and the neocons to overthrow this regime.
And because the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq failed, they never got to go do that. But he wanted American troops. Thousands of American troops died in these wars he was urging.
And Cheney tried to plead Bush to do this in 2007. And even Bush, who's, completely, his complete presidency was tarnished at this point, decided no. Even Bush decided, we're not going to try this. He did other things that were bad to rattle sabers with Russia over the Bucharest summit, saying Georgia and Ukraine will be part of NATO. He wasn't the only one to do that. Clinton basically did that. The Obama administration continued that policy. So did Biden and Harris, said that Ukraine should be part of NATO. But even Bush was dissuaded from overthrowing Iran after the disaster that was his foreign policy regime.
And he wanted a lot more to go die in Iran. So that was the third victory he was promising. It just took 23 years to get the U.S. to greenlight and then start supporting and funding the war that Israel has craved the United States fighting with them for decades.
His regime will do. Because Saddam's nuclear program has fundamentally changed in those 2 decades. He no longer needs one large reactor to produce the deadly material necessary for atomic bombs. He can produce it in centrifuges the size of washing machines that can be hidden throughout the country. And I want to remind you that Iraq is a very big country. It is not the size of Monte Carlo. It is a big country. And I believe that even free and unfettered inspections will not uncover these portable manufacturing sites of mass death.
I mean, just think about it as a rational person. This foreign leader, for some reason, is invited to tell the United States what it should do and whether or not to launch a major ground invasion on the other side of the world. Everything he says, things that he guarantees, things he promises, things he insists on, all of it turned out to be lies. That same foreign leader returns 2 decades later, reads exactly the same script, only this time about Iran, and people just start nodding their head without any kind of skepticism or doubt about the truth of what he's saying to lure the United States into another war. Oh yeah, sure, this time he's telling the truth.
Yeah, the whole pretext is bogus. The war on terror is back. We're seeing the same kind of propaganda campaigns we did back then now, just this time oriented toward Iran instead of Iraq. You got the weapons of mass destruction justification, which doesn't even go along the lines of what the U.S. intelligence community is saying, what Tulsi Gabbard is saying, what these reports from what Iran was doing in accordance with the JCPOA when it was under legal force before Trump essentially withdrew from that, ripped it up. We know that it's a farce. It's bogus. The whole pretext for this war is, and it's a disastrous thing for the U.S. to get sucked in. It's really an Israel first policy. It's just what it is. It's terrible foreign policy, rattling sabers, getting involved in areas that the U.S. doesn't belong in. It's not our fight, and it's never been our fight. Bring the troops home. End the wars. Get out of the Middle East. Cut all ties with Israel. That would be the true America First expedient, one that Trump has ignored, and there was not a really good reason to believe that he wasn't under the influence of the Israel lobby, but there was legitimate credence to the idea that he wouldn't actually bomb Iran or authorize bombing Iran, greenlight bombing Iran, finance bombing Iran, that he was going to avert it, because he did during his first term. He didn't do this his first term. And this term, for whatever reason, Netanyahu saw fit to get involved in this. I think it was a risk he took at a calculated moment where he thought that negotiations might just work, and then Trump ultimately just played along with it. He took that slap in the face that contravened the stated and potentially earnest U.S. foreign policy goals, slapped the president in the face, and the president is still siding with Netanyahu. That's what I'm seeing so far, but I want to hear from what you guys think. How bogus is this pretext? Are you surprised to see it revived again, despite the fact that it failed so badly in hindsight in justifying the war in Iraq? Let me know in a comment below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Consider supporting the channel by becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon patron. If you like my videos, I would really appreciate that. That would help me. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and you know the last one, no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.